In the peaceful hills of a distant land, nestled between whispering trees and winding footpaths, there lived a humble old man named Malu. Malu was not a wealthy man, but he was rich in something far more precious: love. He lived with his beautiful wife and their 3 cheerful children, 2 lively sons and a gentle daughter with eyes full of dreams. Malu was a hard-working man, rising with the sun each day. He didn't own any farmland, but he worked tirelessly on the lands of others, earning just enough to feed his family. His wife, Loma, was known across the village of Abanji for her grace and her vibrant market stall, where she sold fresh fruits and vegetables. Every morning, she arranged her goods with care, tying her headscarf with a smile before heading to the marketplace to help provide for their home. Despite their humble means, the Malu household overflowed with laughter, affection, and peace. Each evening, when Malu returned home, weary from the fields, Loma would greet him with a steaming meal, and the children would race to embrace him. They would all gather beneath the old mango tree behind their house, telling stories and singing songs as the stars blinked awake in the sky. It was a life simple in comfort, but grand in heart. Malu had once been close to many men in the village, his old childhood friends. But as the years passed and his friends grew wealthier, they began to look down on him. They stopped visiting, stopped inviting him to gatherings, and slowly drifted away. Still, Malu would say to himself with quiet strength, "As long as my family smiles when I walk through the door, I have all I need." One day, a festival was announced in Abanji. The entire village buzzed with excitement. Malu, despite his doubts, decided to attend. He missed the warmth of old companionship and hoped to reconnect with those who once called him brother. When he arrived at the celebration grounds, music filled the air and the scent of spiced meat wafted from open fires. Malu saw his former friends laughing loudly, their tables overflowing with food and drink. At first, they greeted him warmly and invited him to sit. Hope bloomed in his heart as he joined them. But as the meal ended, one of the men, Bako, who used to be his closest friend, stood up and with a smirk said, "Malu, since you're not one of the rich ones anymore, why don't you help us? Gather the plates?" The laughter that followed was like thorns in Malu's chest. Malu froze, disbelief tightening his chest. He looked around at the faces he had once laughed with, broken bread with now mocking him like he was a stranger. He cleared his throat and said, "We are brothers, aren't we? I am older than most of you. Must my pockets be full before you give me respect? Each man should clean his own plate." But instead of shame, the men laughed harder. "If you don't clear the plates, Malu," Bako sneered, "we'll tell the vendor you didn't pay. Let's see how you explain that to everyone watching." Malu's pride stung like an open wound. With heavy hands and an aching heart, he gathered their dishes, stacked them in silence, and walked away. The lights of the festival blurred behind his teary eyes as he took each step home. It felt like the longest walk of his life. When he finally reached their small hut in Abanji, Loma was waiting outside, a pot of soup warming on the fire. She noticed the sadness in his walk before he even spoke. "Malu," she said softly, "what happened?" He sat down beside her and sighed deeply. "They mocked me, Loma, because I'm not rich like them. They made me clean up after them. They laughed in my face." She put her hand on his. "You still came home. You still stand. And your family still loves you. Let them keep their gold. We have something they will never understand." From that night, Malu worked even harder. The humiliation pushed him, but not with bitterness, only purpose. He spent his days in the scorching sun, moving from field to field, planting, harvesting, and carrying heavy loads on his back. Even without land of his own, he was known across Abanji as the man who never stopped trying. Yet not all who hired him were kind. Sometimes, when it was time to be paid, they'd say, "Come tomorrow." Malu, and the next day, the same empty promise. His hands would return home without coins, but his heart never returned empty. He carried determination instead. Those same former friends Baco and the others continued to use him, not as a friend, but as a servant. They would call him to sweep their courtyards, wash their long robes, and clean after their parties. And Malu, for the sake of his children, bore it all in silence. One dry morning, Malu approached a man he once called a brother. His children had not eaten the night before, and there was nothing left in the house but hope. "Please, Ekin," he said, "can you spare something? Just a little to buy food for my children?" Ekin leaned back, smirking. "If you want money, old friend, go wash my clothes and clean my latrine." Laughter again, but this time Malu didn't answer. He turned, his jaw clenched and his eyes burning, and walked away with dignity in his steps, even if his hands were empty. Malu felt a deep sting in his chest, but hunger had a way of humbling even the strongest hearts. Swallowing his pride, he agreed. He scrubbed Ekin's floors, washed a mountain of stained clothes, and even cleaned the latrine behind the house. By evening, Malu's back ached, his fingers raw and wrinkled from soaking in soap and cold water. When he finished, Ekin tossed a few wrinkled notes into his hand, barely enough for a meal. "That's all I can spare," he said casually. Malu wanted to protest, but he held his tongue. His children were waiting. He nodded quietly and walked home, holding the money like it was made of glass. On another day, Malu spent the entire stretch of sunlight working a friend's land. From the golden rise of dawn to the reddish fall of dusk, he weeded, planted, watered, and hauled heavy sacks of produce. But when it came time to collect his pay, the man simply said, "Ah, Malu, I don't have the money just yet. Come next week." Disappointment dug into Malu's soul like a blade. But again, he nodded. What choice did he have? His children needed to eat, and his wife depended on him coming home with anything. Despite the bitter injustices, Malu never gave up. Each morning, he rose before the cock's crow, washed his face in cold water, tied his faded scarf around his head, and stepped out into the world with his rusty hoe slung over his shoulder. No matter the weight on his back or the pain in his feet, Malu went out to work because love powered his every step. Soon, harvest season arrived in Ebonji. It was the busiest time of the year, and everyone needed help. Malu saw an opportunity. He knew that Chief Damba, the wealthiest man in the village and owner of the largest farmland in the region, would be hiring. Early one morning, Malu gathered his courage, dressed in his cleanest shirt, and set out with his two sons, Yarrow and Kendi, walking down the red dust road to Chief Damba's compound. He stood before the iron gate, removed his cap respectfully, and waited to be called in. A few minutes later, a guard waved him through. Chief Damba sat under a shaded veranda, sipping palm wine. "Good morning, Chief Damba," Malu said, bowing slightly. "I've come to offer my hands for the harvest. My sons are strong and ready too. We'd be honored to work on your land." The chief studied him for a moment, his large ringed fingers tapping on his chair. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Malu. The farm is big and I need men who will not complain. You can start tomorrow. Bring your boys." A small smile returned to Malu's face. "Thank you, Chief. We'll be there before the sun rises." This, Malu hoped, was the turning point. The chance to prove himself once again, not for status, not for pride, but for the family waiting each night for his return. The following morning, before the first bird had sung or the sky had cracked with light, Malu and his two sons Yarrow and Kendi were already on the road. The air was cool and damp, the earth still holding on to the silence of night. They arrived at Chief Damba's farm just as the rooster crowed, ready to begin. Without needing to be told, they got to work. From the first ray of sunlight to the last drop of dusk, they toiled under the blistering sun, their feet buried in red soil and their hands blistered from gripping tools and thorny stems. When the skies opened in a sudden downpour one afternoon, they didn't stop. They kept working, soaked to the bone, determined to finish what they started. Malu's sons were the reflection of their father's strength. Young but built by hardship, they moved in rhythm, lifting, picking, tying, and carrying with focus. The farm was vast, but their effort was larger. Day after day they returned. Their bodies grew weary, their clothes grew ragged, and their hands turned to stone, but they never complained. In their hearts burned the hope of a better week, a full pot at home, meat in the soup, laughter from full bellies. That hope kept them going. At last, after many hard days, the final sack was tied and stored in the chief's great barn. The harvest was done. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and amber. Malu, covered in dust and sweat, looked at his sons and smiled with deep pride. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "Let's go and collect what we've earned." They walked to the main house of the compound. Malu approached Chief Damba, standing tall despite his exhaustion. "Chief, we have completed the harvest," he said respectfully. "May we now receive our payment?" Chief Damba gave a small nod and reached into a drawer. He handed Malu a wrapped bundle of money. Malu opened it and frowned, only a third of what he had been promised. "You will receive the rest tomorrow," Chief Damba said plainly. "I don't have the full amount right now." Malu was taken aback. In all the years he had worked for Chief Damba, the man had never delayed payment. But Malu swallowed his concern, bowed slightly, and replied, "Thank you, Chief. I will return tomorrow." He went home and placed the small bundle of money in Loma's hand. "Buy meat today. Make something sweet for the children," he said with a tired smile. "They've worked hard, too." That evening, the house smelled of seasoned stew and roasted yams. The children danced around the fire, their laughter echoing across the compound. But Malu, lying beside his wife, could not sleep. Loma turned to him in the dark. "You're quiet. Something's troubling you, Malu. Tell me, was it the chief?" Malu sighed, staring up at the wooden ceiling beams above. "He didn't pay me fully. He said I should return tomorrow. It's not like him. I'm uneasy." Loma gently placed her hand on his chest. "You've done your part. If the chief is a man of honor, he will do his. And if not, we will still find a way." But Malu's heart was heavy. He had worked too hard for shadows and promises. Still, he closed his eyes, clinging to the hope that tomorrow would bring fairness. Loma wrapped her arms gently around Malu, resting her head on his shoulder. "Don't worry, my love," she whispered. "You've done your part. You've worked hard with honesty. And that always brings light in the end. Let's not let fear steal this moment. Tonight, we eat with our children. Let joy be our guest." Malu nodded quietly, pushing aside his worries for now. The warm food, the laughter of his children, and the peace of a loving home brought him comfort, even as his thoughts returned again and again to the chief's unexpected delay. The next morning, he rose early, dressed simply, and made his way back to Chief Damba's grand estate. As he walked the red earth, path lined with swaying palms, hope and unease wrestled within him. The chief's generosity from the previous day had been out of character, too smooth, too sudden. At the gate, he was welcomed warmly. The guards bowed and led him to the shaded veranda where Chief Damba waited, dressed in regal white with gold trim. The table before him was heavy with roasted meats, yam pottage, and fresh palm wine. "Ah, Malu," the chief called, smiling broadly. "Come sit. You worked hard. Let us break bread together." Malu hesitated. This was not how payment was usually handled. Still, he sat, trying to remain respectful as the chief's maid served him food. The air was thick not just with spices, but with questions. After they'd eaten, The chief leaned back in his chair and looked at Malu with narrowed eyes and a crooked smile. "You're a good man, Malu, strong, loyal, but you've worked hard your whole life, and what has it brought you? Dry hands, aching bones, and just enough to survive." Malu listened carefully, his brows furrowed. "I have a different path for you," the chief continued. "You don't need to dig in the dirt every day. I have a friend, an old one, who lives near the edge of the Obika forest. He can show you a way to wealth, real wealth. No pain, no blood. Just a small ritual, a simple act, and your life will never be the same." Malu blinked, confused. "Chief Damba, are you saying I can become rich without working?" "How?" Chief Damba smiled, his gold rings glinting in the sun. "It is ancient knowledge. Sacred, but not harmful. And it's time someone like you, someone pure-hearted, benefited from it. You are not getting younger, Malu. You will not always have strength in your hands. Think of your family." Then, reaching into the folds of his robe, he pulled out a thick bundle of cash and placed it in front of Malu. "Take this. It is 10 times what I owe you. Think of it as a gift, a taste of the life you could live. Keep it. Decide later. There is no rush." Malu stared at the money, stunned. He had never seen such a sum. His heart pounded in his chest. With trembling hands, he accepted the bundle. "Thank you, Chief Damba. I will think about it." As he walked home, the weight of the money felt like bricks in his hands. The road felt longer than usual. His mind raced. Was this an answer to his silent prayers, or a trap wrapped in gold? When he entered the compound, Loma noticed the money immediately. Her eyes widened and her voice trembled. "Mal, what is this? Where did you get all this money?" He sat down slowly and shared everything: the meal, the offer, the strange ritual, and the man in the forest. Loma listened, her face unreadable. When he finished, she reached out and gently touched the money. "Malu," she said softly, "this could change everything, but at what cost?" He looked at her, unsure. "I don't know yet." "It's not blood magic," he said. "No violence. But something inside me still doesn't sit right." That night, neither of them slept much. The money lay on the small table in the corner like a sleeping animal, powerful and silent. Malu held his wife's hand under the covers, staring at the ceiling, wondering whether he had just been offered a miracle or a curse dressed in fine robes. Loma listened to Malu's every word, her eyes clouded with concern. She had seen hardship, but never seen Malu so torn between right and wrong. "This offer, it sounds too easy," she said slowly, her voice steady. "Malu, we've always lived with clean hands, even when our pockets were empty. You must be careful. Sometimes what looks like a gift hides a trap." Malu nodded solemnly. "You're right. I won't decide in haste. Our family's peace is worth more than any coin." But that night, as the crickets sang and the wind whispered through the rafters, Malu couldn't sleep. He lay awake, eyes fixed on the wooden ceiling above him. His thoughts tangled. The bundle of money was tucked safely beneath the floor mat, but its presence pressed on him like a weight. He turned to look at his children sleeping soundly, then at Loma beside him, her breath slow and steady. Could he really give them a better life? Was this the answer to all the years of struggle? Days passed, and each one brought more questions than answers. He spent hours at the edge of the farm, looking toward the distant forest where Chief Damba's mysterious friend was said to live. The bag of money sat in the corner of the house like an unopened promise. But in the end, temptation won. One evening, as the orange sun dipped behind the hills, Malu finally spoke. "I've made my choice," he told Loma. "Tomorrow I will go to the edge of the Obika forest. I will meet the old man and accept the ritual." Loma's face tightened with fear. "Malu, promise me. Promise you'll come back safe. No amount of gold is worth losing you." He took her into his arms and held her tightly. "I promise. I'm doing this for us." The next morning Malu set out. The road to the forest was quiet and long. The trees thickened as he approached, and the air grew cooler, heavier. The Obika forest stood tall, ancient, and full of whispers. As he stepped through the thick brush, his heart pounded louder than his footsteps. At last he saw a small, thatched hut nestled in a clearing. An old man with a long, snowy beard and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets stepped out. "Ah, Malu," he said, his voice deep and calm. "Damba told me you would come. Are you ready?" Malu nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." The old man led him to a stony clearing nearby. At the center was a perfect circle made of white stones, and inside it, strange symbols were drawn in red earth. The old man's chant began low, rhythmic, ancient. The wind shifted. The leaves rustled in reply. Malu stepped into the circle. His skin tingled. His chest felt tight. It was as if the forest itself was watching. From a calabash, the old man pulled a thick, dark oil and handed it to Malu. "This is the blessing of the silent gods," the old man said. "No blood will be spilled, no harm will come. Rub this on your body and wealth shall follow you like a shadow. But beware, every gift has a price. Use it wisely." Malu's hands trembled as he rubbed the oil across his arms and chest. It felt warm, almost alive. As the chanting rose, the wind grew still. A strange shimmer passed through the air. The old man stepped forward and placed his hands on Malu's head. "You have been chosen," he intoned. "The gods have marked you. Use this wealth for light, not darkness." When the chanting ended, the forest fell quiet again. The old man reached into his robe and handed Malu a small pouch. It clinked with heavy gold coins. "This is your beginning," he said. "Much more will follow." Malu bowed deeply. "Thank you." As he made his way out of the forest, the trees seemed to part for him. The sun broke through the clouds as if blessing his path. He walked quickly, unsure if he felt joy or fear. When he reached home, his family was already waiting. Loma ran to him, her eyes wide with hope and worry. Malu opened his palm and revealed the pouch of gold. Their children gasped. Loma stared in silence. "It's real," Malu said softly. "It's only the beginning." But deep in his chest, behind the pride and relief, something else stirred something colder. "Malu, is this real?" Loma whispered, holding one of the gold coins between her fingers as though it might vanish if she blinked. "Yes, it's real," Malu said, pulling her into an embrace with their children huddled around. "The gods have seen our suffering and answered us. Our days of struggle are over." That night, their home sparkled not just with wealth, but with laughter. Fresh food overflowed on wooden platters. The children danced barefoot in their new clothes. Even the old roof, patched too many times to count, didn't leak despite the gentle rain that fell. Malu, smiling in the candlelight, felt something he hadn't felt in years: relief. He believed, deep in his heart, that the sacrifice he'd made had opened a path to joy for his family. What he didn't know was that the true cost of his choice still waited in the shadows. In the weeks that followed, Malu's life transformed like a dream unfolding. His modest mud house became a grand home built with polished stone and carved wood. Gold coins glittered in calabashas, imported fabrics draped across beds, and their meals became feasts. The once bare home was now full of color, laughter, and every comfort they had once only dreamed about. And just when they thought the truth was over, it had only just begun. Thank you for watching this powerful African tale. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because part 2 is coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This story is far from over.